Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1985 family drama, The Journey of Natty Gann. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I want to give a special shout out to Jay or JF for requesting this review. And if there is another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me cover in the future, feel free to donate to my PayPal. The link will be in the video description down below, and I will try to get to it as soon as I possibly can. Now, The Journey of Natty Gann is a really interesting chapter in the saga of Walt Disney Pictures. This is one of their more forgotten and one of their more overlooked films because it's a live action film for one, and on top of that, the approach that it takes is so unorthodox when it comes to your typical Disney movie. This film is surprisingly gritty and actually has a fair amount of darkness to it. Not pitch black darkness, but enough where it isn't all fun and games and happy go lucky and zippity doo dah. Because this is a movie that deals with some very real stuff. And you could say it's kind of ahead of its time when it comes to a Disney movie, at least in the live action arena, that is not afraid to be a little bit more adult and not just be solely for kids. Which makes the poster for this film even more ironic and kind of funny. Because the poster has an image of Natty Gann, John Cusack, the wolf dog, and a train, and then on top of it it says unforgettably, undeniably Disney. It's not undeniably a typical Disney movie, and it's definitely not unforgettable because the movie, for the most part, except for the small cult following that it has, it's definitely fallen in between the cracks when it comes to the history of Disney films. It's right up there with other films that they did, like Condor Man or Night Crossing or the Search, I think it was like the Last Flight of Noah's Ark. So it's right up there with those movies. Films that a lot of people are not that familiar with, or even like a Disney TV movie, um, it was a movie that featured Margot Kidder and Robert Hayes. It was called Trenchcoat, and that's a film that is definitely not very fondly remembered. This is more well remembered than something like that, but it's still a fairly obscure film in their filmography. It's directed by Jeremy Kagan, and I thought he did a good job. I thought that it was old-fashioned. There were not a lot of bells and whistles, so to speak, but it worked for the kind of film that this was trying to be. I think he was trying to evoke some of the same vibes that you would have gotten from a film from this era. So I was okay with things being a little bit more traditional when it comes to the direction. He did a good job maintaining the right tone for the movie. When it comes to the few bits of action that are in this film, and by the way, this is not an action movie, but when it comes to the few bits where things are a little bit more intense, I feel he definitely did effectively uh, uh, showcase a lot of that. And just to give you a heads up, if you hear anything in the background, my parents are watching some show and they are really into it. So I apologize in advance. But anyway, uh, it's a film that does have some legitimately good direction, some nice visuals. There are some really great looking shots in this film of the scenery of the Pacific Northwest, like the mountains or a lot of the forests and so on, or the shots of the train yards at night. It's just a really nice looking film, and I think a big part of that is due to the direction by Jeremy Kagan. It's not the kind of direction that you're going to remember in a way that you would write it down and use it for descriptions of particularly dynamic and dazzling directing. But it's still a good job. He still did a good job, and it's definitely better than average. The screenplays by Janine or Jeannie Rosenberg, and this script is a screenplay that I think is not quite as good as it could have been, but it's still a solid screenplay nonetheless. What I really like about this script is the fact that it's not afraid to go places that you rarely see a lot of Disney movies go. This is a film that, despite its rating of being, I think it's like rated PG, this is not a movie that shies away from reality and the grittier aspects of the time period that it takes place in. It takes place during the height of the Great Depression. So it is a film that deals with a lot of really genuinely realistic and depressing stuff. You have a father who has to leave his daughter, Natty Gann, or Gone, because of the fact that he has to go to the woods to take a lumber job to keep keep working. This is something a lot of people nowadays don't really think about and don't really have any scope of. And it's something that really is kind of crazy when you think about it, that back in that era, jobs were so scarce that you just took whatever one you could get, even if it was out of state, and they would the jobs would provide you transportation to take you to that job, to where you are going to work. And you didn't always have time to be able to say goodbye to your loved ones. You did not always have the ability to even take them along with you. You just had to go. You just had to go cross country and go work in the woods somewhere to make a living. Otherwise, you weren't going to make anything. Otherwise, you were just going to be on the street. And this was a script that was really not afraid to show the reality of that kind of stuff. There's even a family that gets kicked out of their house because they're not able to make payments. And it's not just that. There's a lot of other gritty stuff in this script. I mean, when you first get introduced to Natty, she's smoking cigarettes with boys in the boys' room. She's getting into fights. There's a whole sequence later on where she walks into what is essentially a dogfighting ring. She goes into this building and watches a dog fight. And the wolf dog that she befriends in this movie, that she calls Wolf, well, that was one of the dogs that was in the dogfighting ring. And then it just continues. Like, you have other stuff where there's a lot of people who are drinking, and it doesn't shy away from all these transients and all these people who were left without a home and the people who rode the rails. There, she gets taken to an orphanage, which in a lot of ways was more of a jail, because I think it was like a orphanage slash halfway house for wayward, troubled kids. And she gets locked up in a cold, dark room as if she was locked in solitary. There's another sequence near the end of the movie when Natty gets picked up by a hitchhiker and he puts the moves on her. So it shows that kind of level of realism, and it's something that is just really unheard of when it comes to a Disney movie, especially when it comes to a Disney film from this era. This is when Disney was trying to do a lot of things differently, and it didn't always pan out. Definitely didn't necessarily pan out in the box office, but it's one of those things where they definitely took a lot more risks. I mean, you got an underage girl getting picked up by a guy in a car, and he's hitting on her, and it's insinuated that he's going to try to kidnap her and rape her later, and that's the kind of stuff you do not fucking see in Disney movies. So it was really shocking, and I think it still worked, though, because it fit with the tone of the film. Despite it being a Disney movie, This is something you could have seen released by any other studio at the time, because you don't have a lot of the typical Disney tropes here. Even with the stuff with her father, you have some realistic stuff with that too. He goes to the woods in the Pacific Northwest and he's cutting trees, and something goes wrong and one of the loggers dies. He gets his body is carried off into the back of a truck. Later on, when he thinks that his daughter is dead, he's taking these really dangerous jobs like being a tree topper, because it's supposed to be a job where you don't last very long. There's a high mortality rate. And he's like, I don't want to live anymore because my daughter is dead. Like, there's some really, really gritty and raw stuff in this film. And then there's other sort of legitimately heartwarming moments, though. The bond that Natty creates with the dog is really sweet, despite the dog being a former member of a dogfighting ring, and the dog being half wolf, or actually the dog is a wolf, so she befriends a wolf. Despite it being a wolf and still having primal instincts, they still form a nice, heartwarming bond with one another. The connection that she starts to build with another transient or a potential runaway in John Cusack's character, Harry, that was also really good. Of course, the relationship that she has with her father, that was something that was really sweet. Her father's soul. I thought that was really different to see the father be the focus of things, not the mother or not, some other member of the family, but the father is the focus. It's the father showing his love for his daughter, and it's the daughter searching for her dad. I thought that was a little different than what you would see from the norm. There was also a fun little callback to Disney in a scene where she sneaks into a movie theater and or she goes to the movies with one of her friends, and one of the old black and white Mickey Mouse cartoons is playing on the screen. I thought that was a nice touch. And it's a film, despite how gritty it is, it has a happy ending. She manages to survive with the help of John Cusack's character and a few other people, and she makes it to the Pacific Northwest and then makes it to the woods and reunites with her father. And she also has to let the wolf dog go. That's another thing I like too, is that it didn't have that typical sort of thing where, oh, she's gonna keep the wolf, it's gonna be your pet, and da 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 da. No, she realized that it was a wild animal, and despite the fact that she really, really loved Wolf, when he was hearing the call of the wild, hearing other wolves howling, it was that time. It was time for him to go. And you do have that cliche where it's like, no, go! And the wolf looks back at her like, no, I want to stay. No, you go! So you had that sort of thing going on, but it still worked. Now, when it comes to stuff that didn't work for me, for one, there was this whole bit with John Cusack's character Harry, where it seems like him and Natty are almost a couple. Like, they're trying to insinuate that these two might be infatuated with one another. Like, there's a scene where she's writing a letter to him, and it's from the perspective of her possibly being in love with him. And then there's a scene later on where they share their goodbyes when he gets a job, and she kisses him on the lips, and it's just something that's very awkward because of the fact that Natty seems like she's an underage kid, and I think she is an underage kid. She's not of age, and Harry seems like an older guy. So it's just a kind of really uncomfortable, weird dynamic that didn't need to be in the film. That should have been cut out entirely. These characters were fine the way that they were set up. You didn't have to have them be an item or have some insinuation that they might be an item. It just didn't really fit. Speaking of Harry and Natty, though, I wish that there were more scenes with them, because Natty meets Harry when she first gets on her first train, and I think like in the first 30 minutes or so of the movie, and then he just disappears, and he's no longer in the film. He's missing for a good majority of the running time until the last 30 minutes, and then it's her and Harry, and they've teamed up with the wolf dog, and they're trying to make it to I don't think it might be Seattle, trying to make it to Washington so she can find her dad. And there was a nice bit where the two have to think on their feet and jump onto the top of a train. But it's just one of those things where I feel that there should have been more with those two. Instead of the scenes where she gets captured and gets sent to the halfway house for wayward kids, or the scene where she hangs out with these other transients her age and helps them steal a bowl. I think you should have just had more scenes with her and Harry, and have her and the wolf dog, and have them have a few more adventures or something like that, instead of what they were trying to do in the middle of the film, because the movie kind of sags at that point. It starts off strong, and then when she gets on the rails and she loses track of Harry, and it's just focusing on her and the dog, while she's being not necessarily tempted by a lot of things, but while she's dealing with a lot of these other trials and tribulations of being a runaway. It's just one of those things where I just think it would have been stronger if you had Harry involved, because the way that those two characters were written, it was seemed like a good connection, at least not when it comes to the romantic chemistry, but when it comes to the other chemistry, it seemed like it was working well. So I think it would have benefited from having more scenes with those two. But those are really the main issues that I have with the movie when it comes to the script. Everything else I thought worked really good. I thought it was a nice screenplay. And then, of course, you have the cast. This film has a legitimately good cast as well. Meredith Salenger in her acting debut, I thought was amazing, especially for a first-time actor, especially someone so young. She had a certain charisma and strength to her that was very palpable. And then on top of that, I really felt that she nailed the character. She nailed the toughness of the character, and it felt very real and believable. But she also nailed the more sensitive aspects of the character, the vulnerabilities of that character. Jed the Wolf Dog, he played Wolf, this the same dog that was in The Thing. And the dog did a good job. John Cusack played Harry. I liked his performance. I thought he had a good bit of chemistry with Meredith Salenger, but they were not on the screen as much as I think they should have been. Ray Wise was incredible as her dad. It was very intriguing to see Ray Wise play a loving, doting father instead of a crazy psychopath or a bad guy. It just showed his range, and it really showcased that this is a guy who was way more talented than people give him credit for. Like, he had a much wider range than just playing a bad guy or a henchman. Lanie Kazan, she played Connie, the bitchy woman who reluctantly decided to take care of Natty, but then treated her like crap. She did a good job playing the role that she was asked to play. Scatman Crothers is in this. The few scenes that he's in, he definitely does leave an impression. This was the last film that he did before he passed away. And that's the reason why you don't see more scenes with him. But he did showcase his talents in the few scenes that he was in. He definitely did leave his mark. I miss Scatman Crothers. He was one of the better actors when it comes to portraying someone who's wise and up there in age, but has a really good heart. You also had a few other people like Barry Miller, Verna Bloom, Grant Heslov was in this in his first major film role as one of the members of Parker's gang, the gang of kids. But really, it's a film that focuses mainly on Meredith Salenger, John Cusack, Ray Wise, and the wolf dog. And the main four, they all perform really well. And definitely do make the film even better because they are a part of the whole production. The wolf dog, the whoever trained that dog did a terrific job, and the same wolf dog was in The Thing. So that wolf dog that you see right here on the poster for The Thing, right next to Kurt Russell, that was one of the same dogs that was in the Journey of Natty Gann, which I thought was pretty cool. That the same wolf dog from the Thing was in this movie. That's what happened to that dog. It went back in time. That gives you like a whole new perspective of this movie. Like, oh, she's being all loving with it, and oh, cute wolf dog, I love you, wolf. And then you're like, no, run, run, run. It's gonna get you. The film also features some absolutely gorgeous and breathtaking cinematography by Dick Bush. That is an unbelievably unfortunate name. Gotta be honest. I mean, Dick Bush, like, what is this guy, a porno actor? But it's a really good job. He worked well with the director. They had a great back and forth with one another, a good rapport. And visually, this film is just stunning at times. Like, the cinematography is just gorgeous. He captures the grimy look of the 30s very well, but also the beauty of it. The sequences that take place in the forests or take place in other parts of this film's story. I have mentioned the rail yards at night, but I'll mention them again because that's just a really great looking series of shots. And one shot in particular I thought was really impressive is when Soul, Natty's dad, he's doing the tree topping thing. So he's way up high on a massive tree. And the tree is like really, really high up there. And he's straddled he's got his legs straddled around it. And there's a great shot that just pans all the way up the tree and just shows him just way, 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 way up there. And amongst all of these other trees, and that some of that might have been done with a matte painting or something along those lines, but there was a lot of that was shot for real, and I do think that it just creates a very vivid looking film when it comes to the imagery, and it really does help when it comes to immersing you in this world, this time capsule from the 1930s. The music is by James Horner, and you hear notes of what you would hear later on in other scores. Typical James Horner, recycling stuff, but it's still a really wonderful score. It's rousing when it needs to be. It's emotional when the time calls for it, and it definitely does provide even more heart to the film. The film is also well edited by David Holden. It's got some excellent tight editing. And the movie's 101 minutes, but it doesn't really drag a lot. Like I said, it does kind of sag in the middle, but it didn't really get to the point where I completely lost interest. I just feel that things would be even more compelling if you had Harry introduced, or not necessarily introduced, but you have more scenes with Harry and Natty and the dog. Overall, I did like it. I liked it quite a bit. I would say it is a little underrated, especially it's one of those films that isn't talked about that much. For the longest time, it was only available on this DVD, and it was in full screen and bare bones. I think Disney Movie Club released a Blu-ray, and that's the transfer that I saw because I was able to get a hold of a copy of it. I don't actually have the Blu-ray. I want to get the Blu-ray, but I saw it in widescreen with HD quality footage, and it really did help because this film just has some really nice looking shots and some good visuals, and that really wouldn't land the same way on some pretty second rate transfer that's only in full screen. I guess Anchor Bay was initially going to do a release of this, and they probably would have done a great job, just like they did with The Watcher in the Woods. But something happened, and their deal with Disney fell through or whatever, and so it just was released bare bones, full screen by Disney, until Disney released the Blu-ray. And the Blu-ray, though, is still only a Disney Movie Club exclusive, so you still have to get a Disney Movie Club subscription and buy it through there, or you have to buy it through eBay and pay out the nose. So that's a shame. I hope it's at least streaming on Disney Plus because it's a film that I think deserves a little bit more recognition. It deserves to be seen by more people. And I at the end of the day, I agree with Siskel and Ebert. They said it was a fine family film, and I think that's a great way to put it. But anyway, I don't really know what else to say about the Journey of Natty Gann except thanks for watching, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.